Secrets of the Ferns. Chapter 11. Time for Soup. Centuries and centuries ago, Daniel and Lucifer were explaining the Eden Project to the Fangul leadership, recruiting a high-ranking member to the cause. Her insights proved very useful, as she knew that Daniel and Lucifer had very good reason to make this implanted failsafe in humanity. It was a rebellious decision against God, who was overgrown with wicked tendencies and incompetence. Daniel and Lucifer worked for God at this time of the Eden Project and had to keep things quite secret. Daniel, as a mortal, also had timely dealings and obligations to several human kings as an advisor. The immortals were busy, as they were sent shipments every 12,000 years of these packages filled with bagged soup, labeled primordial soup, do not eat. The immortals crafted humanity and species of animals out of this soup. Some of the gods, when it was their turn to run the creations department, stayed consistent. God had to hire Lucifer to do his bidding before that fateful day when he had trapped him in the cubicle, unknowingly giving him freedom of his jurisdiction. Lucifer made about 10,000 fertile and virile people in Africa and Europe. They multiplied with arduous capacity over the millennia. Odin in his career had crafted some northerners, but when they tried to claim the New World as theirs, the New World Corporation sued Kor. Cronus spent most of his time eating the soup, while many of the other immortals were keen on letting humanity do its thing and preferred to invent new animals and plants. The soup was shipped in automatic orders from the CEOs, who only appeared themselves every 3,000 years. From the time they created the immortals and set up the three major corporations, the CEOs visited only a dozen times, orchestrating the corporations and the immortals that worked for them. Between appearances, they would send shipments and communications to the creations on Right of East of Right near Indonesian Empire, and not to forget New World Core. Their names had been unfortunately antiquated with the invention of the word West and the dissolved empire of Majapahit in 1530. Everyone was behind Buddha's ideas of a Buddhist empire in the early stages of civilization building, but the humans, of course, destroyed it. It had been several scores of millennia since the immortals created humans. Humans were competent enough at that, thanks to the designs of arrows that Lucifer continued during his temporary hand in creations. "Soup time!" Hermes yelled, carrying 12 packages of the bagged primordial soup. Daniel and Lucifer had been making their ill-fated plans with a successful failsafe in the form of a tree and a leader of serpents. The board of directors gathered secretly as God stayed in his office, planning on using the soup for new locusts and mealworms. Thoth, Hermes, Odin, and Anansi sat at the old oak table, complete with New World delicacies like pumpkin pie, blueberry muffins, and corn pudding. The theme of this meeting was New Beginnings. So I just got off the phone with Quetzalcoatl and Coyote, and they have agreed to let us move to New World Core on the condition that they handle their own creations department and we don't interfere with life at all. During this announcement, the messenger god stroked his Greek beard in a bittersweet satisfaction. Across the table, the one-eyed Nord responded enthusiastically. "This is great news," Odin beamed.
"Yes," said Thoth. "It's this, or to face the lake of fire. We should never have allowed God to have acquired this much power?
Odin wanted to chastise them all for firing Daniel. He wanted to tell them how he had warned them. At this point, he had some odd faith in him, as if he could tell that Daniel would somehow mend God's destruction. Odin was simply happy that there was an escape plan enacted. Anansi addressed the immortals.
Gentle lords, I must say this with care, but I will be staying here in Africa. There is too much at stake if we forsake our duties to Kor. We have at least 3,000 more years till the next corporate visit, and my web is too entangled with empires left and right, east and west, is it? I simply cannot leave. However, I wish y'all the best.
Anansi reached up one of his 8 limbs with a tissue and, grabbing it with another, wiped tears from 5 of his 8 sobbing eyes, looking at each god seated at the table. The 4 immortals adjourned a meeting with some of Odin's mead, and enjoyed the cuisines of tomorrow while reminiscing of their times in their various homes across Europe and Africa. They did not know God would find out their plan to abandon him at home or elsewhere. They did not know God would command them through the lake of fire. When they were sent through the lake of fire, they all landed in a forest on a planet very much like Earth, in an alternate dimension. They were convinced that they were in the Amazon rainforest, but the snakes were not helpful, the ferns did not have secrets, and there were no bananas. They began to speculate they were not home when they were discovered by a weary traveler in torn black robes named Judas Iscariot. Judas told him he was Daniel and later Confucius, and told them everything he had done with Lucifer, who was now imprisoned in an office space. They all agreed that Judas was not lying and congratulated him on enlightening Jesus to the facts of God.
Well, we're immortals,
those had declared. Yeah, and? Judas asked.
You are not. It is now proven that the lake of fire is not a certain death, but a portal to this place.
Those looked at all the trees around him with disgust. The sound of brush getting cut down by a sword drew nearer and nearer. 2 barely clothed conquistadors came out. State your names, mortals, Hermes demanded. Yo soy Hernan Cortez. The frightened man dropped his sword and drew his hands up quickly at the sight of the tall, electric immortals. Mi nombre es Pedro de Alvarado, shouted the second conquistador, who followed Cortez and dropping his sword. Hermes talked to them in length about how they showed up here. He told the immortals and Judas that they had been sent through the lake of fire, located in what is presently known as Mexico City. Then it was called Tenochtitlan. They were not carried to Tenochtitlan by immortals and away from Camille Juju, but by disgruntled armies of Quichean chiefs who saw them polluting the fountain of youth with their canisters in present-day Guatemala. The conquistadors met with these immortals and Judas under strange circumstances. Judas Iscariot, who remembered his past life as a peasant in the place of many trees, long before the Spanish invasions, did not take this news lightly and advised the immortals to arrest the 2 conquistadors. They were then handcuffed and kept close by as slaves for the Immortals and Judas as they searched for a way back home. 6 years later, Judas had been elected leader of the outfit and was leading them closer and closer to the desert north of the jungle. There was a prowl of jaguars with their cubs. "I'm going to talk to these guys and see what information we can get," Judas told the others. So, telepathically, Judas asked them the way out, to which they knew the answer, but was reluctant to give it freely. Finally, they told him that the way out was located over 5,000 miles away by foot through a cave in a region very much like Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Unbeknownst to the Immortals, Judas and the Conquistadors, there were no Homo sapiens in this dimension. "The jaguars told me that was the way out for Immortals," Judas told them. "However, I must go back to them to find out how mortals can return home." Judas approached the prowl again, asking how he can embark on his way home. The jaguars all looked at each other, and after carefully explaining it to Judas, who seemed troubled but calm, they began to rip him to shreds and ate him alive. He died quickly as the third jaguar pounced him, taking a huge bite out of Judas's throat. A baby was born in Como, Italy, 61 after death. Born to a well-off, politically and philosophically involved family, Pliny the Younger was inclined to greatness. He thought his dreams were memories and that his nightmares could somehow be traced back to real events. It was until he brought a lion to be used to punish Christians with. Pliny the Younger was very infatuated with the beast, but horrified by the proposition of cruel and unusual punishment. His worship of the Roman gods brought out memories of their real Greek and immortal counterparts that he had spent some time with as Daniel and later Judas. Having believed these to be nightmares and having a bad taste in his mouth at any mention of God, Pliny still showed mercy to all the citizens he dealt with. It is worth noting that when Pliny the Younger heard news of his uncle's death in the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, he began to question the emperor on how to deal with Christians. It is also worth noting, however, that early Christians were actually the same agents who crucified Christ and hunted for him after the so-called resurrection. God hired these poor souls to do his bidding, but not all of these Christians were guilty of being corrupted. Some were Gnostic, and some were bringing forth errors that centuries later became members of the Constantine administration. Pliny the Younger reincarnated as Adrianus, who started to believe his seemingly eternal memories. Adrianus reincarnated as a Balkan servant's son. It was the midst of a Roman civil war, the year of 5 emperors, and a lot of political turmoil was taking place. Somewhere deep inside this peasant was the memories of very important truths, and a memory of Satan, once Lucifer, working in a weird-looking office with padded walls. It seemed so familiar to him, yet so strange. There were no more lions in this area, so some memories seemed very outlandish, like when Satan told him that he needed to learn some more humility and a few more lives before reincarnating into any more statuses of power. Centuries passed as the man in black kept reincarnating into peasants of countries all around the world. In 1564, A Spanish soldier who answered to a very powerful conquistador was fighting the Mapuche in what is presently known as Chile. A flood of memories and deja vu struck him as he remembered Judas's account of meeting the conquistadors who had been trapped outside of their right time in an alternate dimension. He had gone rogue and was later found and executed. His black armor stripped for metal, his body an example to his troop of what would happen to them if they should desert the Spanish Empire. A day later, thousands of miles away, on April 23rd, 1564, it was the feast day of St. George, and a baby was born to a member of a land-owning class. Mary Arden, who was married to a glover and black market wool merchant, whose name was John Shakespeare. They named their baby William. William, as we all know, as the be-all, end-all giant of modern English literature, made his own hell broth when it came time for soup. It was the memory that Judas had helped clean some primordial soup off of Hermes' sleeves from delivering one busted bag of soup. William remembered at age 12 lots of bizarre things that troubled the family as their business was going under. They kept him busy with academics. William remembered being eaten by lions, who consumed a small portion of the soul in the alternate universe. The soul that was trapped inside of soup. And that's how human life started evolving in that reality. But by then, the immortals had found the cave portal and came back to Earth as we know it. William wondered if he should ever meet Odin and Hermes again, or Anansi and Thoth, even though the man in black hadn't lived a life in Africa since the time of Daniel.